Hey now, Rob here, Rob School of Music, and I am so excited today because I get to hang out with someone that I have known for over 20 years, at least, the legendary Mr. Jake Bowen from Periphery.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going good, man. It's going good. So we went to high school together, and we both played guitar in high school, and you know, rock and roll dreams were a big part of that process. And one of us got to actually achieve them in the coolest way possible. So I'm just really excited to kind of dig in and hear, your steps along the journey.
Hey, man, I appreciate that, but don't discount what you've done too. I mean, I've driven down the street, and I'll be looking to the right, and I'll just see this giant billboard with your face on it, your cartoon face, and I was just like, good for Rob. That's awesome. So
Uh,
I really like what you're doing.
Thanks so much, man. We're a music school, Rob School of Music, and being in the education space, I think one of the most important questions to kind of ask, because this is the question that's asked to me by a lot of our students, and I guess we'll go backwards from here. But just in general, like when you're going to perform, how do you prepare for that? Like you're on big stages with tons of people and a lot of technical things where things can, hopefully never go wrong, but can go wrong. And just how do you mentally prepare yourself for all of that?
That's a really good question because it's kind of like what I've been trying to figure out at this stage of my life. Um, I'd always just assume in the past that, okay, if I have like, 2 or 3 weeks, I can get all the material I need to know down, and I'll be good to go. And then as I spend more and more time doing this job, I'm like, I don't like that about my playing. I don't like when I do that. I'm slopping that. I realize that there's all this stuff that I kind of, in order to economize my practice time, I kind of sweep under the rug. And I don't want, I decided a couple of years ago that I didn't want to do that anymore. And I started really getting out in front of the practice schedule before a tour. So to even though the guys probably make fun of me because I'll be asking about the set list like, months in advance just so I can get a head start. And it really helps. Like, I feel like I can really drill down on things and kind of make sure that I'm not just doing like good enough. Like I'm really actually representing the material as it sounds on the recording. Because you get a lot of these bands and you can kind of even hear it. It's almost like you can guess, like, all right, there's a lot of studio tricks on these recordings. How are they that good live? And a lot of times it never really kind of like hits that spot. And I'd even say Periphery is guilty of that too. But I think that like we all have like made efforts in earnest to try to make that as authentic an experience as possible while having kind of like that pristine, really technically proficient production style that we use on everything. So as far as like what the practice getting ready regimen is composed of, it's like it really is just kind of making sure I know all my parts, but then making sure I know what the other guys are playing too, or at least having an idea of what it is in my head, because I can play my parts better if I know what they're playing and what's going on rhythmically. Because like we do a lot of layering, and sometimes the layers are kind of in a different sort of rhythm than the main riffs. So trying to just like really understand the music is the most important part. And really, I have stems of all our recordings, and I just go through and kind of nitpick everything. So that's without getting into specific exercises, which I don't really do a whole lot. That's probably the biggest component of my practice.
That's awesome, man. And it makes sense. And it's so fascinating to me because I've asked variations of that question to a lot of different professional musicians, and everyone has their own unique answer, but the preparation element is always a big part of it. If you know your stuff, you're going to do your stuff, and then you can only control so much. So I appreciate that answer.
And like the other thing too is like to realize when you're playing something at home, the feeling that you experience when it's when you're playing live is so much different. The way the passage of time is actually like discernibly different, and you kind of have to learn how to attenuate that sort of pace for a show, because sometimes a show can be really that feels really really fast, and then a show can be like, wow, this song is way slower than I ever realized. And kind of being able to harness your adrenaline where it needs to go is also an element to keep in mind. It's not anything you can practice. You actually have to. This is why the practice is so important. It's because you work on it so much to where it is just innate. It's muscle memory at that point. And when this other factor comes in, your chances of staying on the beat are way better if you know the material like the back of your hand. So that's kind of like, I think that's what we're contending here with, at least on the level that I'm playing.
Yeah, no, totally. I kind of actually, I'm going to go to a tangent here because you talked about the stems. At the school here, we have a stage that I built in the front, and everyone is on modelers. It's a Roland V drums. Everything is digital, so to say. Everyone has their own headphone mix. So I'm letting young musicians get the experience of sort of having whatever they're going to hear specific to them. When you guys are on stage, what are you hearing in your ears? Is the stage noiseless? Is the click obviously is going the whole time, but like what's in your head?
So there's a number of things going on, and I'll try my best to kind of explain them without getting too techno jargony or whatever.
Go nerdy. It's okay. It's cool.
So we run a wireless in-ear monitor package where we have custom molded in-ears that go into our ears. This then goes to a setup that is attached to a computer, and the computer sends out our click track, any backing tracks that we have going, and we also have our own individual mixes of what the other band members are playing. So I have, Misha, Mark, and Spencer and Matt all in different places, volume wise and mix wise, EQ wise, in this whole thing. So it's basically like playing in a virtual room. And that I think that was probably the biggest step into becoming a tighter band and a more professional band, is because I played with floor wedges for so many years, and that stuff will make you deaf, and it's fun and it feels really, really good. That we actually figured out a way where we can have the in-ear thing, but also have some stage volume too. So you can feel that kind of like air pushing at you if you walk over to your cabinet, or, you got the people in the front row who, if you didn't have amps and cabs on stage, they would have to be kind of further back in order to get the full sound of the band. So what we do now is we have amps and cabs on stage as well. And through our guitar processors, the things that make our guitar tones and the periphery sounds, we can split that to where one guitar signal goes to the amp and cab, and that same guitar signal gets split and goes to front of house, where our sound guy is controlling it. So that way we kind of have the best of both worlds, and we're not going to go deaf. The audience up front will be able to hear what's going on. We can enjoy that sort of like air being pushed vibe on stage, like a loud rock show. And the one other thing I'll mention is that we also don't have any pedal boards. We go in advance and program all the sounds for the songs that we're playing. And we have MIDI messages that are being sent out through the computer into each one of our guitar units, and it changes it right on the beat or whenever it needs to be changed in the song. So that way I don't even have to think about going over to my pedal board, because there have been a bunch of times back when we were on pedal boards where I'm like, oh, I gotta run across the stage and change my sound. So we don't have to do that anymore. It lets us be more free. And having the wireless rig is also, kind of crucial to that.
Awesome. All right. No, That I think is super important to understand, because when I first was just turning, younger kids onto, you're going to put on headphones and you're press this button. You can only, because what we do with it is, let's say we have three guitar players playing in a band. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but if one of the kids is maybe not as good as the others, or not as, at an earlier place in their journey, cleaner way to say that, we'll say, okay, everyone click number 5, turn them off. So the other two guitarists, they don't hear him, but he can hear everything. So he can get himself comfortable. So it's sort of an education spin on the
That's a
idea of
really good idea, man.
Thank you. And it works fantastically. And they're all rocking out. And you can kind of see the kid who maybe doesn't know what they're doing as much, but to them, they're having fun. And that's kind of the biggest part of it.
Getting over that initial hump when you first start jamming with other musicians is really tough, because you don't know how you're going to feel. You don't know like what your aptitude for the material is. And that kind of lets them dabble in it and then not disrupt what else is going on. Exactly. But I'm sure the transition is less jarring, because I remember being very scared when I first played in front of people.
Dude, absolutely. It's so surreal. I'm going to go super meta here, but I was just at Suffern High School last week. I had to give out a scholarship, and I'm backstage where where Guitar Club was, in 1990, whatever. And I just had all these flashbacks of Tom playing the drums and Your Beautiful Purple Ibanez and just all this stuff. So I met you in 9th grade, but you already were musical. What made you prior to that say, like, I want to be a guitarist and get into this? Was it a concert? Was it a record? Like, what was the genesis of what you became?
I think it was probably going to like alto music for like maybe the first time. I might have been there before, but I was old enough to kind of like notice things and be curious about them. And I saw a bunch of like Jacksons or Ibanez's or whatever they had there at the time. And I was like, man, those look really cool. Like I had no concept of how they were used, what they sounded like, what was the difference between a good guitar and a bad guitar. No idea. Brand new. And that was kind of like the thing where I was like, maybe I want to play guitar. Maybe I don't want to be in Little League. Maybe I want to play guitar. And that was probably like when I was 8 or 9 years old. So a long time ago.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's always fascinating to me, like, what's the thing? Because everyone has their thing. It might not be like one very specific moment, but it's a collection of things that, as we grow into it, you're like, oh yeah, that definitely, like,
yeah,
I wound up in the right place.
Yeah, I'd say that was probably like my oldest memory. Like beyond that, I can't remember being interested in guitar music. But like you said, it's multiple things, and of each thing kind of pushed me further in that direction. And it's never one thing, I guess, is the thing that any aspiring musician who doesn't know if they want to do it or not. It's just like, just let it happen naturally, because it will. Right. It will absolutely will.
Completely. Yeah. If it's done organically, you're just going to find your way to what you are. At what point did you start to realize that, wow, this could be my job. This could be my career. I mean, just to, now be someone, you got your own pickups, you got multiple signature guitars. I pre-ordered the blue one when it first was released. Sweetwater has not yet sent it to me, but I will have one eventually.
Oh wow! Thanks, bro. I didn't know that.
Dude, because that's when you came and did the talk here. You had, I guess, the red one, but it's that guitar kind of. So I was like, oh my god, if I can have one of those, I'm going to have one of those. But it's just yet to come.
Yeah.
What was your? Oh, dude, yeah, no, I'll make it'll be in all my videos. I'm psyched. At what point in your journey did like Periphery come into it, or whatever was before that led you into where you became, in terms of now this is what you do for a living?
Yeah, I think I might have prematurely thought that I could rely solely on the band, like as a career. Because I remember the moment I stopped working like a normal job. I was working at this place, and they wouldn't let me go back to New York for Thanksgiving. I needed time off, and they're like, "No, you have to work. You have to work on Black Friday or whatever." It was some like bullshit real. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to swear. It's
so loud.
Okay.
We're a house of art.
Yeah, good, yes. Yeah. So like, it was a retail job that like I really didn't care about, and I was already kind of like at one foot at the door any day of the week. And they're like, you have to come into work. And I'm like, all right, well then I quit. So then I don't have to come into work.
Right.
And when I did that, I'm like, you know what, I'm going to stick to my guns here. And I tried my best not to spend any money and just worked on the band until it like started to, make enough money to pay the basic bills. So I don't recommend what I did to most people, because like if I didn't have like great friends and people supporting me, I wouldn't have been able to do that. So don't recommend just telling your job to stuff it, even no matter how good it'll feel, because it felt great. But yeah, I'd say when I really started to take notice of like the status of the band changing was when our second album came out, Periphery 2. And I think it came out in 2012. So 2012 is when I really started to like make bigger moves with the music.
That's incredible. I mean, and your albums are just fantastic. The newest one is insanely awesome, epic, and huge. Gent is not a genre. That's just amazing.
Thanks.
What I guess I would like to focus on real quick, just the gear side of things. I know a lot of young students, they go on Instagram and they're like watching some dude who's shredding their face off and they're intimidated by it. I'm like, dude, no, don't choose inspiration, not intimidation, and you'll find your way. Which I guess is the overarching theme of this. You as a guy, you get to say, I have a signature guitar, signature pickups. Like, what is the development side of that? Because that's such a special, rare, incredible achievement. And I think I'm just really curious what that process is like.
Yeah. So I kind of piggybacked my first signature guitar off of the rising sort of status of the band. And this was back when your social media presence is like a very dynamic and ever-changing thing. So it was just at this point in that particular time of social media where like you could post something and people would get really excited about it. Whereas like now it has to like be part of an algorithm, and you're basically like tricking people into seeing your video. And it's like, it was a little different back then. And so like I posted a picture of a custom shop, and people kept hitting me up. They're like, is this going to be a signature? Is this going to be a signature? And that thought had never crossed my mind. I'm like, I'm not the kind of player that gets a signature guitar. I didn't really feel worthy of it, but I kept getting that question. So I was like, all right, well, if you want to see this, just email Ibanez and tell them. And eventually they hit me up because of enough people hitting them up. And that's kind of how it started. And it wasn't like, it wasn't anything that I thought like I was worthy of at the time. And it was just due to the fact that like I designed a cool guitar in the custom shop, cool enough for people to actually want it. So actually it looks like this. This one has dust all over it because I haven't been taking care of my stuff. But this was actually the second version of that guitar. This one's pretty old. I had this since like 2013 maybe. Oh, that's a 7-string. Oh no, I think it was a 7-string. Anyways, I'm thinking out loud. And then when that happened, I was like, I got big ideas in my head. I'm like, oh wait, you know what? If I'm getting a signature guitar, I should see if I could do a signature pickup, and they could both come out together, and that would be really cool. So I was with DiMarzio at the time. I'm still with them to this day, but I had just signed on with DiMarzio. I'd probably only been with them a couple of years, and I was just like, all right, this is a shot in the dark, and they're probably going to be like, no, but you don't know unless you try. And they were very excited about it the moment I brought it up. So, in like kind of one sort of like moment, I went from just some guy who just thinks he plays guitar to now someone who they want to build guitars for. And it was very surreal and kind of I'm still in shock that I can, that's part of my life, and I feel very, very lucky. And it's a good feeling, and I love the guitar. So I think it's extra cool to like put something out that you really believe in and that you use, because I feel like it's very easy, especially now, to kind of get into sort of like an endorsement black hole where you're constantly known as the guy that like tries and applies new gear in really cool and interesting ways. And I believe in this guitar, so it's nice.
It's awesome. How did you go? So like, I'm a PRS guy. I love their guitars. I like the woods they use, but I always think to myself, okay, well, if I had a one Rob, there you go. Yeah. Yeah. I let one of my students borrow. I had the SE one, and I let one of my students borrow it, and he hasn't given it back yet.
Okay. I wouldn't either. It's a great guitar.
Yeah, right. But like in terms of like tone woods, like or trem or non-trem, like I've always struggled in my mind because I love it all. How were you able to say this is Jake in the moment, like a snapshot of your favorite things?
I've experimented a lot. Like I'm kind of I've always been the kind of gear guy where like I don't get rooted into one. I used to get rooted into one thing. I used to be like only Mesas and Ibanez's. That's all I play. And then I started hanging around Misha and other guys who are just crazy about gear. Then I realized something, that there's space for everything. Everything you can use. And all my guitars are different, like different wood, different strings, different pickups and stuff, and they all inspire differently. They all have mojo, as I like to call it, and each mojo is unique, and it's depending on what guitar I pick up will really inform what I'm writing. As far as like putting it into a signature thing, that's when you have to kind of like settle down on something and have a good reason why. And my reasoning for why I went for the specs on my signatures at the time with the first guitar, the JBM 100, I was really into like mahogany, and I had a maple top on there, and it was just a really dark sounding guitar. And I think dark sounding guitars sound great live, because when you're playing live, there's all of this like high end that's added in there, and it, depending on the room and all that. So it's probably, the difference is probably minute, but I prefer to kind of like go on the less bright side of things. At least I did back then. Now I've changed a little bit because my tone has changed, my picking hand has changed, my pickups have changed. So now I'm using something a little brighter.
Knowing that you like all these different guitars, and I know you're a Fractal guy. I think when we did our last talk, we were talking about the Axe FX3, which I have since gotten, and I love it. And now I gig with an FM9, and I absolutely love that. And I could never imagine to go back. I have a million fantastic amps in here, but just for live use, it just makes more sense. If you're on a desert island and you had to have one guitar, one amp that is not a, digital multi-effect sort of thing, and one pedal, what would you pick?
I would probably pick my this LA custom shop. It's not here right now. It's actually with Periphery's gear, but it's basically like a black and gold version of my signature, kind of my new signature, that I kind of like put the two guitars together, style, like shape wise, it's the one, my newest one, but color wise, it's my original one. And then the other thing that's in there is an Evertune bridge. So, cool. I think the Evertune is one of the, it's probably like the most important guitar invention since the humbucker, probably. It's so important for low tune music, in my opinion, just any music, and just staying intonated. Guitars are like notoriously poorly intonated instruments, and sometimes that's what makes them fun. But when you're in a band with three guitar players, or where like precision is, priority, the Evertune is just, I love that thing. And then let's see, you said amp. I have to pick an amp.
Yes.
And it can't be a modeler. It's got to be an amp.
Yeah, because it's too easy the other way.
Yeah. I can't. It's like a cheat.
Yeah. Which
I'd
is how you
say,
answered it when I asked you this question the last time. So I'm preparing for. Yeah.
all right. I'd say probably the PV Invective. I think that's probably the best modern high gain amp out. And it's funny because Misha was one of the guys, the other guy in my band, in case people watching don't know that, but he's the guy that helped design that amp. And it just addressed all of the stuff that me and him used to complain about, like back in the early days when I was using a triple rectifier and he was using an Engel Invader. And we just like, we'd have all these things like, why do they do this? And why do they do this? And why isn't it like this? And is it really that much more to put this in there? And like the Invective addresses all of that. It has like has a boost in front of the for the input. It has a noise gate. It has 2 effects loops. You could change it via MIDI. It comes with a really robust foot switch. The clean channel is great. The crunch channel is great. The lead channel is great. Like it really excels in all of these categories. And it's like, it's kind of funny, like that it has all these features and it's like, you know, this really like huge amp and it costs the same as like, you know, another high end amp. So I'd say that's kind of my my amp pick.
Okay. And a pedal.
And then what was the third thing?
One pedal.
Pedal. Probably just a digital delay. I used to love that. I think it was a DL4, Line 6 DL4. Is that right? The right number? DL6.
4 buttons, yeah. No, 4 with the 4 buttons.
Yeah, the green rectangle.
Green one. Yeah.
Yeah, probably that one. I've kind of like backed off pedals a little bit just because I've tried so many of them and I don't know what I like. But I remember I spent a lot of time with that Line 6 and I used to write really fun stuff with it. It was like one of the few pedals that also had a reverse delay on it too.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So you can get really like trippy and melodic and you can do very like ethereal and atmospheric stuff on that pretty easily. So probably that one.
Yeah. And it took 4 C batteries. I remember that.
Yeah.
So random for a pedal.
Yeah. I remember it like, you know, I used to have that, I think they're called One Spot and it like you daisy chain all your pedals. And whenever I'd plug that one, I'm like, ooh, this one's a big power draw. See if it works.
Awesome, dude. All right. Well, before I go into the rapid fire part, just like if you were to talk to a younger version of you, because every day of my life, I see young versions of us, not to generalize, but just rockers. First finding Metallica, first finding Pantera, first finding Dream Theater, first finding you guys. And they're now inspired. They want to do it. Like now having been in the game professionally for over a decade and over 25, 30 years, just in general, like what advice would you give them?
Yeah, that's tough. I think about that from time to time because it's like I wonder if I'd listen because I was so stubborn back then. I'm still pretty stubborn. I'm just different stubborn now. And I wonder if I would be the same person I was today if I changed kind of what that early version of me thought, which the early version of me is like not that cool. Like he's just like very, very stubborn, very weird, and very kind of like didn't know why the world was the way it was. I still don't, but I deal with it a lot better now. So I'd say like kind of I don't know if you experienced this, but when we were in school, I just felt like that was it. Like that was the world. And I always forgot that it was much bigger out there than like what was going on in that school with those people. And once I like realized that, I'm like, man, I spent so much time like worrying about like what people thought and like what I was doing. And not that I like change that made me change or do anything differently. It was just a waste of like mental energy. And I would probably just like try to tell myself to not be so anxious all the time. Because like I never measured that anxiousness as I got older and became an adult. And I realized that like it really infiltrated a lot of the way that I do things. Like I won't take deep breaths. I'll have like shallow breathing, or I'll be eating too fast, or I'll be moving too fast. And it's like, it's all anxiety and anxiousness. And that started probably in adolescence. And then, you know, I let it get bigger and bigger and not addressing it until much later. And, you know, you kind of, you pay the price for that, mentally and physically. You know, stress deteriorates us. So that's just a really long way of saying like, chill out, bro. Don't be stressed. You know, like that's kind of like what I'd say.
Dude, it's so spot on. And I don't know if it's I'm going to say a word that is, I don't like to identify as, but a mature way of saying it, because every day, dude, I watch kids who are so wrapped up in high school or middle school, and this girl won't talk to me, or this guy says I'm ugly, or just horrible things that kids or young people are saying to each other. I guess everyone. And I say the same thing. Like, I was so consumed by it, and it felt so heavy and so real. And in hindsight, like, none of that mattered. There's so much more going on. So that is tremendous advice. And I give that advice often. So we'll find out if it works, but I agree entirely.
Yeah. I think, and you know, props to you for giving that advice, because like I think the one thing that kind of held me back early in life was, at least in school, I really didn't like have a mentor, or like people there were a couple of like teachers who I really respected and thought they were like good people, and they were idealists, and they were like trying to help. But there really wasn't like anybody like you now are giving advice like that could really, really help and really change the course of people's lives. I mean, you're doing two things here. You're giving kids confidence to perform and create in front of others and to share a gift. And you're also kind of giving them like earthy advice about, you know, being kind to yourself and not stressing yourself out and stuff. So it's good. And you know, I think why I kind of like meandered into life the way that I did is because I didn't have that, and I kind of had to like figure it out. And I just consider myself lucky, but a lot of kids, you know, never figure that out.
Yeah. Oh, well, dude, thank you. Those are really kind words, and I appreciate that very much. And that's what I'm hoping to do. So, you know, I hope just want to make it better. The confidence is important. Like, I tell kids, me 20 years ago, me 5 years ago, me like now, when I'm not Rob from Rob School of Music, shyest, most awkward human in the world. But it's like this music gives the confidence just to kind of like, it's almost like a suit of armor. You can like just hire a shield, go behind it, and you're like, okay, it's part of your identity. I don't know.
Yeah. It's going to the office. You're putting your suit on, and
yeah,
you're,
totally
doing what needs to be done, and then you go and you go home and you be yourself again. You know, it's the same
Absolutely.
thing with Periphery and being a musician professionally.
Yeah, awesome, dude. Rapid fire questions. I'm going to ask you a series of questions. It's a this or that question. There is no right answer, except one of them. I do believe there is a right answer, but we'll see how that goes.
Okay.
Just say one or the other. You don't have to justify your answer, but you're more than welcome to. Ready?
Okay, let's go.
Humbucker or single coil?
Humbucker.
All right.
And why?
Yeah.
And
all right.
why?
Yeah, justify him. Do it. Yeah.
Because you can split a humbucker.
No one has said that yet, but you're totally right. People give me these hard, passionate, like, no, because you get more dynamics with the single coil, but the humbucker is more metal. No one said that. So easy. Great job. Yes. Okay. Les Paul style guitar or Strat style guitar, meaning, you know, like solid body heavy thing, or like more like contour.
I'd say it's funny because I play a guitar that's a mixture of both. I have the dual humbucker, or my old signature has a dual humbucker configuration, which is like a Les Paul, and I have the switch configured to where I can split the humbuckers into more of a Strat style sound. So if I got to pick one of those two, I'd probably go to the Strat, just because I like that split sound, especially when it's overdriven and you're playing it with somebody who's not playing a split coil sound, and you can kind of layer them, and it makes it sort of like it has like a bass tonality to it a little bit, especially when you're riding on the low string. So I probably go with the Strat.
Cool. Awesome. Okay. Tremolo or hardtail style guitar?
Asked me like 10 years ago, and I would have been like Floyd Rose all the way, man. But I'm now a hardtail guy. I feel like I have enough guitars with Floyds on them, and they give me enough headaches to where like now everything is going to be Evertune, or hardtail.
Cool. Okay. For your guitar pick, is it a thin, medium, or thicker pick?
Thin. I got one right here, and this is how thin it is.
Really?
See, very thin. And I can explain why. There's a reason. There's like a technical reason why it's thin. So when you have a band with two other guitar players who all pick we all pick really hard. I'm probably the lightest picker out of the bunch, but we all pick really hard. When you're picking the string, you're sending it out of tune just enough where it won't be like out of tune when you're playing, but if you're playing it against other instruments who are also sending their string out of tune, you have this really like crazy warbling effect, which if you were to listen to like live stems of us playing, the older versions of us would sound way more out of tune because we were using let's see here. I still use these picks whenever I want to like do some crazy all picking stuff. Where the freak is it? Here we go. So this is more of like a Jazz 3 shape, like the Dunlop Jazz series. And this is much, much thicker.
Oh, yeah.
See, that one bends like that, and that one's like really hard to bend. But yeah, so we all moved to the Dunlop Flow. These are the Flow picks. And now with more give on the pick, that means less detuning on the string upon attack. So it's probably most people wouldn't notice it. Maybe they would. I don't know. Maybe I'm not giving people enough credit, but it's enough in the ears where we're like, this sounds better when we play it with the thinner pick.
That's awesome. I would have never guessed that. That's really cool. It just totally threw me off even more. I was going. Okay. String gauges. I mean, this is hard because you use a lot of different tunings, but then with the Evertune, you could use 8s and tune it to G and no one would know. But pretending that you're just using a regular guitar, do you like 9s and standard tuning? Do you prefer 9s, 10s, 11s?
In standard tuning, which I don't play in too much anymore, actually, my 8 string is tuned to standard. This guy right here.
Awesome.
But let's see, what do I have on this? Actually, I have to look that up because they're just the Diodario NYXL 8-string pack. NY 8-string pack. Let's see. I can tell you exactly what the gauges are here. 9 to 80. Okay, so it looks like I prefer 9. Oh wait, no, that's the super light. That's not the one. The one I'm looking at is no, it's not that either. Huh. They don't have the right pack on here. Oh wait, here it is. 10 to 74. Wow. Yeah, here it is. 10 to 74. I'm on a website right now looking it up because I'm a nerd. All right, here we go. 10, 13, 17, 30 wound, 42, 54, 64, 74. So that's probably what I would use on a normal 6-string, but this one has those extra 2 strings with it. So I have a signature set coming with Horizon devices, Horizon strings, and I can tell you the gauges on those in case somebody like wants to make a pack out of like whatever strings. They can just use these gauges. So I have 10, a 14, a 17, a 31, and a 43, and a 58 for my 6-string, and that's that gauge combination. That's for anything from drop C to this G tuning where like the 2 low strings are both G's and the rest of it's down a whole step. Yeah,
cool.
yeah. Let's see if I can show you real quick. Oh, that's a terrible noise. All right, let's see.
You guys do the that G tuning, because that's different to have two of the
That
same
was the
note
Mark
together.
thing.
Yeah.
Mark started playing that tuning like probably on like the tour, whatever tour we were doing right before we did the Periphery 4. And we'd be about ready to go on, and we can hear each other playing in our ears. And he'd just be noodling around with that tuning. So both me and Misha were like, show us that tuning. And then we all just kind of started writing stuff with it, because it can sound like that's 8-string territory, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So you can have like an 8-string sound on a 6-string. I don't recommend it unless you have an Evertune, though. I played enough shows on a standard bridge in that tuning to where I'm like, this is not sounding great. So if you're gonna play in that tuning where it's GGCFAD, then have an Evertune, because it's going to be too low to stay in tune.
Wow.
Yeah,
It's cool though. It's definitely cool.
yeah. It's fun.
All right, I got more rapid fire questions for you. Ready?
Lay it on.
Rosewood or maple fretboard? Or ebony?
Yeah, I guess it depends on the guitar, the build. I mean, I probably have mostly rosewood guitars that don't have ebony. I've always been, ebony fretboard guy, but I have a maple guitar. That the purple one you mentioned that I had in high school, I still have that guitar. That has a flame maple fretboard, which I think looks really, really good. And a bunch of my, like, I had Indonesian versions of my signature come out, and they used to have rosewood. They might have rosewood again, but because it went, like, they put it on the endangered list and then they took it off, and we moved over to Jatoba, I think it was. No, Nyato. Whatever. But we might have gone back to rosewood. I forget. But yeah, probably rosewood.
Okay. For your distortion, if you're not using fractal, do you prefer amp gain or pedals pushing it?
I guess overall the amp has to sound good, and if I don't have a pedal and the amp doesn't sound good, like, the pedal isn't necessarily going to make the amp sound better. So I probably go with the amp, but there is an argument for both, because you can use a tube screamer, which is essentially like an EQ curve for your input, and you're kind of taking out a lot of that low end that just kind of muddies up a guitar signal. So yeah, there is an argument for both, but if I have to pick one, amp.
Okay. 6L6 or EL34?
Probably 6L6. I think all the amps that I ever owned are all 6L6. I've played a lot of great EL34 ones. Like, I remember Misha had this Engel Invader, and that was EL34s, and I thought that amp was really fun. That was a really, really cool and unique amp.
I was always a 6L6 guy, just Mesa. Growing up, that was the sound, and then I've developed a taste for both, but that took time. Would you prefer a 100-watt amp or a 25-watt amp?
In an apartment, a 25-watt amp. But I've tried using 50-watt amps for like classes, clinics, and stuff like that, and I'd play with them and be like, man, this would not cut it in a heavy metal show at all. So definitely a 100-watt amp.
Cool.
I think the thing that kind of drives me nuts about amps in general is that it has that volume jump at the really low volume. Like, they don't have like a bedroom setting, or like an attenuator for the wattage. And it's like, why? Like, not everybody is going to be cranking this. So some amps do, I guess, but it's just kind of annoying, because you can kind of finagle it by like kind of keeping it right at that threshold, and it'll jump if like you just kind of go like an inch or
it blows your face off.
Yeah. And it's just like, God damn it. Like, why do they make them like this? But yeah, 100 watts.
All right. We are onto the effect and pedal section. Delay or reverb?
Delay, because you can I think reverbs are good for like kind of making a vibe, but I think delay is probably more useful for compositions. And you can also kind of create an ethereal effect by turning the feedback up, turning the mix knob up, and kind of getting a sort of reverby effect, depending on the amount of repeats you have going and all that. So I feel like compositionally and vibe wise, the delay pedal edges reverb out. But obviously, I use both on everything.
Right. Yeah. These next three are just the answers both, but it's fun to pretend.
Yeah.
Phaser or chorus?
Chorus.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't mess with phasers too much because I feel like they introduce a lot of mid-range, unwanted mid-range into like a mix or whatever. Because it's like I'm not.
You get that hiss. Yeah. No, totally. You're right.
Yeah, I'm not too into that. But I mean, when you're the only guitar player in a band, you can get away with a lot of stuff. But the whole thing with Periphery is there's so many guitar players and there's so many layers that you kind of have to be very careful about what effects you're using. But I'd say like the chorus is pretty useful because you can add that to anything with delay and reverb on it and kind of turn the depth up on it and the rate of which it's kind of I forget the term, but where it's kind of moving the EQ around while you're playing it. All chorus does this, but or I should say most of them do, but you can use that to great effect when you're playing clean arpeggios because it'll give it like that sort of uneasy feeling vibe. A good example of this is in synthwave music. When you hear an instrument, a keyboard, it'll sound detuned, and chorus can have that effect on the guitar. And it's a fun compositional tool because you're kind of like toying with people's nostalgia a little bit at this stage in the game. And a lot of that is just because a lot of the stuff back then you could tune actively, or you could set the tuning on a synthesizer to be like off a little bit, and you can have the two oscillators like off a little bit, and that was a style, it was a sound.
Yeah. No, totally. I mean, it was interesting when the question left my mouth. I figured with your electronic music you do and your solo stuff, I imagine chorus can find its way into that world too. So very cool.
Yeah, sometimes.
All right, dude. I got like three more, and then I will let you go. But thank you so much for your time so far. Just a couple of this or that. Awesome, man. This or that band questions. Beatles or Stones?
I'd say like because they're both legends and they both like have songs that everyone knows. Mm-hmm. I'd say as far as like legacy and sort of like who inspired more musicians, I got to go with the Beatles. So we have them to thank for a lot of modern music. So
I agree.
So Beatles.
Okay. Zeppelin or Floyd?
Floyd. Because I again, you're like picking bands that just, basically
there's no answer. I know.
Yeah, it's just like you're apples. You're choosing apples and oranges here. But the reason why I would pick Floyd is because they kind of mass-produced prog music and like really like cerebral music. So did Led Zeppelin in a lot of ways. Like they were like pretty like heavy for a band that existed before heavy metal. But as far as like Pink Floyd, they were messing with soundscapes and odd time signatures and like lots of stuff that prog bands utilize, and everyone just kind of like, oh, that's nerds music. But no one thinks Pink Floyd is particularly nerdy. So, they were able to kind of like show people like, look, these are interesting musical choices and musical devices for the artist palette. Here's how everyone can enjoy these. And they didn't kind of like alienate people with musicianship.
Completely. So if it's Pink Floyd, then is it Dark Side or The Wall?
Is Dark Side of the Moon a concept album?
I don't think so. I know The Wall is, but then
The
Dark Side
Wall
goes.
is, yeah.
Yeah, The Wall is, but Dark Side goes with Wizard of Oz, but that's not intentional. I don't know. I don't know if it was meant to be.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not like a connoisseur. I just it's more of I come from an angle of respect. But
Sure.
yeah, I'd probably pick Dark Side of the Moon. I felt like The Wall. They're both great albums, but The Wall is like really serious and like it kind of. I mean, I don't know what the story is really. I have a feeling it has something to do with fascism, and so like the subject matter just comes off as like kind of heavier. And
Yeah.
Dark Side of the Moon, I'm sure, has a bunch of heavy songs on it, but I don't know the lyrical content as well. And it's just it's more of like a mysterious listen for me. Whereas like The Wall is, pretty realistic, heavy subject matter, that kind of stuff. But again, like I'm not speaking from any sort of like place of like I know these albums like the back of my hand. I know of them. I've listened to them. I like them, but I'm not like
Dude, that was the perfect answer. That was a really good answer though, because it's true in terms of like you hear some of those songs to The Wall, and The Wall just keeps hitting you over and over again with this like, oh my God, stop, give me something happy.
Yeah.
All right, two more: Pearl Jam or Nirvana?
Yeah. Nirvana. I remember. I went to the CD store, which was I think where I bought CDs before like anything, like before I was able to get to the mall on my own, was Talk of the Town Video. I don't know if you remember that place.
Of course I do.
It was
Yeah.
they used to sell video games and rent movies and
Yeah.
and
Wow.
music and all that
Throwback.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I went there hoping to get a copy of Corrosion of Conformity's Deliverance because I was listening. I heard their songs on the radio and I'm like, man, I gotta have that record. But I went there and it was such a small place, they wouldn't have a record like that. They weren't that big of a band back then.
Right.
But they had Nirvana Nevermind. And I was like, oh, I know Smells Like Teen Spirit. I got to get this record. So I got that because I didn't want to go home empty handed. And I just listened to that album like front to back. So I love Pearl Jam. And I think Eddie Vedder is probably one of the most, unique voices ever to live. But I listened to Nevermind more than any other Pearl Jam album.
Okay. That's all good.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the one that I feel like is probably most in your wheelhouse: Metallica or Megadeth?
I remember having this argument in school, like because I remember I started to move towards Megadeth, and a couple of our mutual friends like would be like, "Nah, man, Metallica. Like, why are you playing with this Megadeth stuff? Like,
Right.
like they're just a Metallica ripoff, anyways." It's like, no, man. Like these guys are like, these guys are heavier, edgier, and anyways. I went through stages of both, and now I love both for different reasons. I do have to hand it to Megadeth, kind of like exploring a couple of albums worth of like different sounds, and then realizing, nah, look, we're just going to be Megadeth, and it kind of went back to their roots on later albums, and I think that they can still pull it off. But I got to give credit to Metallica because they had this, not the last single that came out, the one before that. I forget the name of it. I think it was like Lux Eterna or something like that.
Yeah.
Is
that was the first one for this record. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard that and I was like, wow, this is like the first Metallica song I've heard that I love since like something from the Black Album. I was just like, this sounds like the Black Album, and I regard that album pretty highly. So,
sure.
So that long-winded answer is just a non-answer. And,
That's both. The answer is both. That's okay. There's both. And it's funny, like in high school, I was one of those dudes who was like, Metallica, what are you, an idiot? Megadeth, they suck. And then like I liked Trust, which came out when we were in high school. I liked that song, but that didn't really sound like older Megadeth stuff. And then in the last maybe 3 years, I found it. I was like, oh, oh, there's something here. So it's the evolution
Yeah,
of
I
the
mean,
musician, man. We just listen to everything.
the riffing on, so I think the golden era is Rust in Peace, Countdown to Extinction, and Euthanasia.
Euthanasia,
And
absolutely.
the riffing on those albums is it, like I still put it on and I'm like, this would be sick now. Like if this
Yep.
came out now, you know, that's how ahead of its time it was, especially Rust in Peace. I still like, you know, I still, you know, I will have everyone in the car be quiet if Tornado of Souls comes on, and like that solo, just like ridiculous musicianship in that era. And it's kind of like, I wonder what the next band who kind of has that effect on me will be.
Yeah. I think that's the coolest thing. And I guess that's like how I can conclude this is like getting to live music every day in different ways, but still both getting to live music every day. I think there's so much hope out there I'm sure, you know, when I look out here and I see all these kids coming in and they're playing guitar, I'm like, okay, it's going to be okay. When you're looking at it in a room full of people enjoying guitar driven music, like it's going to be okay. There's more music coming and we're doing a good thing, and it's rock and roll, man.
Yeah, you can't pirate a live performance. You know, that's the one thing they can't take away from us yet.
Yeah.
Until
Yeah.
they got AI to like make robots just do it.
Yeah. No, we'll close our eyes and our brain will make us think that we're there.